All right, thank you very much for coming this morning. My name's Nicola Roxon and I'm the Federal Attorney-General. I'm here to be able to deliver some good news to the Australian public today, and that is that the Japanese government has agreed to the release and return of 3 Australian men that are currently on a Japanese vessel. I want to particularly thank our officials in Tokyo and the Japanese government for their cooperative work in being able to come to this point. It is obviously good news for the 3 Australian men. Our officials were able to make consular contact with the 3 men late last night, and they have been assured that they are all in good health and being treated well. We have now dispatched a customs vessel, the Ocean Protector, to go and rendezvous with the Japanese vessel in order for us to be able to have the return executed with the 3 Australian men. That customs vessel is currently on fishing operations in the ocean, so it's had to change its course. It may take several days for that rendezvous to occur. It does depend somewhat on the conditions that occur. We are pleased that although we have a very different view to the Japanese government about whaling, that our strong diplomatic relationship has enabled us to be able to come to this resolution. We've taken a sensible and measured approach in having those discussions, and it has resulted, of course, in a good outcome for these 3 Australian men. I do, however, need to underline that if people do take action outside Australian territorial waters, and if they take action, no matter how strongly they believe in the cause, they will subject themselves to the laws of another country. And the legal options that Australia can then pursue are limited. And although the Japanese government has agreed to the release of these 3 men, that is no guarantee if activists take this sort of hazardous action in the future that they will take the same approach next time. Stopping whaling is one thing, but taking hazardous action, which ultimately costs taxpayers, is quite another. And I do need to, in the strongest terms, urge anyone, no matter how passionately they feel about stopping whaling, that if they take action that is hazardous, if they take it in the open seas, if they take it without the consent of a vessel or government that they might be protesting against or boarding, they are putting themselves at personal and at legal risk. I can't emphasise that strongly enough. We now obviously will push ahead, as we have been commenting on for some time, but particularly as questions have been asked about what the Australian government will do to stop whaling. We've said for some time that we think the best way for us to be able to stop whaling once and for all is the procedures that we're taking in the International Court of Justice. We are expecting a response in that case by order of the court. They, of course, set out the timeframes, the end of March. We will persist with that action, and we still believe that that is the best way once and for all for us to be able to maximise our chances of stopping whaling, and we do need to encourage people to be very careful and very considered if they set off on this sort of hazardous action in the future. And I suspect that the Australian public's tolerance of such action will be very much affected if the ongoing costs of retrieval are something that taxpayers need to meet. Any questions?
The Japanese have a bit of a history of taking protesters that go onto trespass onto their vehicles back to Japan and putting them on trial through the legal process there. Why did the Japanese government agree to release these 3 men this time?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I'm not going to put words into the Japanese government's mouth. I'm quite happy for you to put those questions to them. My belief and understanding is that the discussions were very constructive ones. We do have a very strong diplomatic relationship with Japan. This stands out as one of the few issues where we have a serious disagreement, and I think the good relationship has helped us in being able to get to this outcome. Obviously, it's in everybody's interests. The 3 Australian men who are trying to draw attention to this issue have certainly successfully done that. It's not in their interests, and obviously Japan has made a decision in this occasion. It's not in their interests either to keep them on a boat for a long period of time or to return them to Japan to face charges. But it's very important that people understand that there is no guarantee that that will be the approach that would be taken in the future. Each instance will no doubt be assessed by any government that would be affected by this. And I am very concerned that Australians not misunderstand what is a good outcome for these three men is no guarantee that future action taken that might be unlawful or hazardous will be responded to in the same way by another government.
Where will the Ocean Protector be meeting up with this Japanese ship, and how far away from Australia will it be?
Well, at the moment, obviously the ships are travelling in different directions. We've had to divert the Ocean Protector to now return and head back towards Australia. The Japanese vessel was heading towards the Southern Ocean, so there will be a rendezvous point. For a lot of operational reasons, I've been advised not to go into the detail of that here with the media, but it will take us a number of days, and it will depend on the weather conditions where that will exactly occur.
So will it occur in the Southern Ocean?
I'm really not in a position to be able to talk to you about that today. I have been advised and specifically asked, knowing well that you would ask me today, we have been requested for operational reasons not to itemise that location to you. Of course, you know and we know that the Sea Shepherd is currently sort of in lockstep with this Japanese vessel. They are making information public, so it isn't difficult for people to understand the course that is being taken. But for our operational reasons, we will make sure that, one, we can meet as quickly as possible, so the exact location will depend on weather conditions and how quickly either boat is moving in either direction. We need to make this transfer in a safe situation. That may affect where it occurs. And I'm simply not in the position to be able to provide that to the public or to the media.
Is there another ship currently patrolling illegal fishing?
No, the Ocean Protector is the ship that has been on fishing operations. It's now being diverted from those operations in order to be able to collect these three Australian men. Obviously, that means that work that would have been undertaken by these customs officials will not be able to be for a period of time. So there is not just the financial cost, but there is also the cost to not undertaking the work that would have been done. And that's something that I think the Sea Shepherd and its activists do need to take account of. We've made very clear that we understand why people want to protest about whaling, but it is another thing if you take the law into your own hands, and then, of course, consequences may flow that the Australian government isn't able to control, or isn't always able to control, and there are costs that taxpayers will then pick up the tab.
Do you have any idea how much that will cost taxpayers?
Well, it will be a significant amount of money, particularly because the vessel is already in the ocean and needs to return. It needs to return at a pretty fast rate. That means you use more fuel, that has higher costs, and of course there is the opportunity lost for the work that would be done on the fishing operations, which doesn't necessarily involve an extra cost, but means that we won't have been patrolling the ocean for the normal fishing work that would have been done during this period of time. We haven't made any decisions, and obviously we'll take advice about the exact circumstances of returning the men to Australia. That may also mean that the Ocean Protector loses even more time if it needs to come all the way back to Australia to safely return these men to shore.
In terms of cost, we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands?
I'm really unable to give you a complete breakdown now. I think we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, more than tens of thousands and probably less than millions, but it really does depend on how easily the transfer can occur, depends on the amount of time it takes, and it depends on where the final transfer of returning the men either to another Australian vessel or to shore is affected and affects the cost.
Are you going to be asking any of these three men or three men to help pay?
Well, I would very much like these three men to consider what contribution they would make, or the Sea Shepherd for that matter to consider what contribution they would make. I must say I'm not going to be holding my breath. The truth is the Australian taxpayer will foot the bill for this sort of action. And whilst many millions of Australians would like to see whaling stop, many of them may also resent the cost that they are contributing to for this handover and rescue, if you like, of Australian protesters. It's all a matter of balance, and stopping whaling and protesting to stop whaling is one thing. Taking hazardous action that may put you at personal risk of the laws of another country and cost taxpayers money is quite another.
How long will the international case, how long do you expect it to take until there's a decision?
I'm happy to take that on notice. The next step that is underway is that Japan needs to respond. I think if I remember correctly, it's mid-March that response is due. then there is quite a lengthy process where either further information is sought, hearings might be held. It is something that takes a number of years. The international courts don't move fast, and I know that that is a cause for frustration. But ultimately, as a government, we have to behave within the law. We have to use the law. It's a big step for us to have taken as a government, something that previous governments, talked about and never did. To take this action against Japan, particularly when they are such a close diplomatic relation on all other matters. But we're doing that, and it's now working its way through the court. But I think the expectation is certainly in years rather than in months or weeks.
Yeah, so wouldn't it be better then for Australia to then try refire the IWC process and actually try to get a deal then that might actually stop this or see some limitations quicker than potentially a decade-long process?
Well, we haven't ceased any of our diplomatic efforts, and we've continued to be involved with the IWC, and we will continue to be involved. But taking this legal action is one course where we believe we've got the best chance, or we're maximising our chances of having a successful decision which will stop whaling once and for all.
You're saying the process to retrieve these men could take a couple of days. Are we expecting them to be free by the end of the week?
The best that I can say is we're expecting it to take a couple of days. It is notoriously unpredictable for us when we're trying to talk about two ships moving in different directions and weather conditions that can very much affect the time of transfer. There will be close cooperation. We're happy to keep people involved, but the best estimate that we now have is it'll take a number of days.
Have you been able to make contact with the men and got any information about conditions that they've been kept under?
So we've made consular contact with them late last night. We're able to confirm that they are all in good health and well and being treated appropriately. There are some limitations on what we can discuss in the conversations that were held between consular officials and the individual men, but we are assured that they are in good health and being treated well.
Were they on a hunger strike?
We've seen reports of that. I haven't got any information available that I can give to you, whether that is in fact true or not.
Were they being kept under lock and key?
I can't answer that question, I'm afraid. There's not a lot of places you can go when you're in the middle of the ocean on a boat, so I suspect they feel pretty contained.
The shadow citizenship spokesperson has called for new immigrants to receive some manner of program or training on how people behave in Australia in terms of not jumping queues and using deodorant and things like that. Do you think that's a good idea?
Look, I think these comments are pretty trivial, to be honest, and a bit patronising. I'm also surprised, coming from the Shadow Minister, who has got some background in this area, that she's not aware of the extensive support that is provided through our investments in working with different communities in Australia. But I couldn't think of a starker contrast. I mean, here we are dealing with international issues, international problems like whaling, our relationship with Japan, the safe securing of 3 men, and you have the Liberal Party with no policy on any of the important issues that were debated throughout Parliament last year, now running up some relatively trivial issue to try to create a diversion. I think it's a bit of a sorry state where the Liberal Party has got to that's their main policy issue that they are pursuing at the moment, and I'm certainly interested to know if Mr Abbott supports this or not.
So it's not an issue as far as you're concerned?
Oh, look, I think we do a lot to support people who come from other countries properly integrate into the community, whether it's language support, whether it's educational programs or others. That is the way to do it, not to try to beat up some sort of issue. And as I say, I'm quite surprised to see the spokeswoman do this. She has some background in this issue, and I would be interested to know whether Mr Abbott shares her view.
The spokeswoman has also called for a mandatory cultural awareness for new immigrant employees. Could the government force that upon employers to make their new immigrant employees do something like that?
Well, again, I think that it's showing a lack of awareness about the programs that are already in place. It's also showing a lack of awareness that this is a two-way street when you talk about cultural understanding, and really launching these sorts of trivial salvos into the community without actually doing any genuine work to try to understand how we can all understand each other better, I think is not something that is doing much credit to the tradition of the Liberal Party.
What do you think the effect of this incident and the negotiations will have on Australia's relations
Well, I think they're evidence of a very healthy diplomatic relationship with Japan. We have very strong ties on a range of issues, and we've had long-standing differences on whaling. So it's obviously a difficult situation. I am very appreciative of the approach that the government in Japan has taken, and I'm very appreciative of the work of our officials, the ambassador and his team in Tokyo. I think it does show that it's a strong relationship that can withstand these sorts of differences. But I wouldn't like to be in a position that we push that friendship, and Australians who are considering taking action outside Australian territory, which may subject them to the control of another country and which is hazardous in itself, really should think very carefully before they do that, because there are limits to the action that an Australian government can take if potentially unlawful action occurs outside Australian territory. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.